Nigeria will survive its challenges despite escalating grievances, says Fitch. The Fitch Solutions Group, an affiliate of global ratings agency Fitch, has stated that despite the threats posed by the Islamic insurgency in the north, clashes between Fulani herdsmen and pastoralists in the Middle Belt region, as well as growing unrest in the south, which have continued to threaten the country's existence, Nigeria will survive its challenges over the next decade. The UK-based organization stated this in a report titled Nigeria Country Risk Report Q1 2022, which also includes a 10-year forecast to 2030 obtained yesterday. However, there was a downside risk that the ethno-religious divide will eventually lead to the breakup of the state. The next several years will be a major test for Nigeria as the slow recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic deepens poverty and further erodes the government's ability to provide public goods. So, know your take on this.
Right. It's quite a broad-ranging report, but generally cautiously optimistic is how I describe it. But they're really not telling us what we don't already know or suspect at the very least. That yes, we're burdened by numerous challenges, but nobody expects those challenges to actually break us. So after the sort of economic projections, they now veer into politics, observing what we already know again, that as this administration winds down and as politicking heats up, all kinds of issues, policy reforms and what have you, will take the back burner to electioneering, political campaigns, which might end up being quite tense because of the zoning arrangement and the arguments that have sprung from that. They also talked about the legal standoff that we're dealing with right now with the VAT issue. So it's quite a broad-ranging report. But yes, like I said, nothing new here for me. Nothing stands out as novel.
Dr. Abatu? Well, we often have these country risk reports. This is a country risk report coming from the Fitch Solutions Group for the last quarter, for the first quarter of next year and the second quarter going forward. These are usually projections based on existing realities in a particular country. And a report like this is supposed to guide both government of the target country and also guide investors. Investors look at some of these details. But in this particular case, yes, I agree with Tundun that there's nothing in the report that we do not know yet. But a number of issues. One, about, the fact that a combination of ethnic and religious division issues could lead to very serious compromises in terms of the integrity of the Nigerian state itself. And the caveat that, in any case, Nigeria will still survive up to the next decade, whatever may happen. But at the same time, there are things that we need to worry about. They try to downgrade the projection in terms of GDP from 4.8%, which was their initial projection for 2021, to 4.2 for 2022. And the argument is that many of the reforms that the government plans to carry out, that once we get into 2022, and the process of electioneering for 2023, hot up, then it may be difficult, to see many of those reforms through, particularly with electricity, reform in the electricity sector, reforms in the oil and gas sector, which is expected to be a big issue within the first two quarters of 2022. Then they expressed concern, of course, about the effect that the political process will have on the economy itself. Well, that, of course, you could say is a no-brainer because once the electoral process begins, once INEC announces the calendar for 2023, very little attention will be paid to details of policy because the government at the center itself will have been lame dog. I think they also tried to segregate their analysis in terms of what happens in the states, how states in the south, the ones that have resources, are likely to fare better than other states that are not doing so well. Well, I think this is just one of those routine efforts that they do on a quarterly basis. This is from Fitch. Sometimes we talk about IMF report. Sometimes we talk about World Bank report. But the point of it that many Nigerians will take away with is that whatever happens, even outsiders believe that Nigeria will still survive. But the security challenges will need to be addressed. The issue of poverty will still have to be addressed, both in the short and mid-term and long run, and also the challenge of unemployment. This youth bulge that is displaced, that has no work, and that finds some kind of other occupation for itself that affects the stability of the country. Very interesting and detailed report, as expected, but we'll see. Nigeria will survive. So it's that Mario guideline clause, in the analysis that I think, many Nigerians would like to go away with. That indication that no matter how bad it is, there's still hope for Nigeria.
Yeah, Nigeria will survive. I'm sure Andrew is listening to that. Thank you guys so much this morning. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sodiri, Michael Wilson, Adeso Moro, and Aaron Akirjala give us updates on Africa global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Moving on to business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Shares in Asia Pacific fairly mixed actually this morning, just like they were yesterday. The news from that area is that South Korea has raised its policy rate by a quarter of a percent to 1%, which is following yesterday's decision, a similar kind of move yesterday from the Bank of New Zealand. So things tightening up in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng gained about 0.12%. Shares of the developer Kaiser Group soared more than 18 as they resumed trading. They're going to announce an offer to bondholders to exchange their existing bonds for new ones. Again, it's one of these developers. Again, mainland China's stocks basically down today, but China Securities Journal is running a story that more fiscal stimulus may be on the way in China. As far as one of its big tech developers is concerned, Tencent, China's authorities have ruled that if they want to approve or alter their apps, then they have to get regulatory approval for that. They found that several of the apps made by what is China's most valuable technology company violated data protection rules. This process could take round about 7 days, but a further sign that the Chinese authorities are keeping an eye on these big tech companies. Baidu kicks off its robo-taxi business. It's got the okay to charge fees in Hong Kong, in Beijing rather. So I'm looking at now 67 self-driving cars, rather than me, I have to say, but there we are. 67 self-driving cars in one of Beijing's suburban districts. Not exactly sure what the pricing is going to be, but it's an important moving forward in terms of pricing. It means more companies can get into it, through apps like DD and all the rest of it. US blacklists a dozen more Chinese companies to the trade. It's added them to the trade blacklist, citing national security and foreign policy concern. This latest move obviously comes as there's more tension between the United States and China over the status of Taiwan, and trade is one of the subjects which both the presidents have been discussing in their various virtual talks. When they sit down to a table, I suppose things will be very different indeed. Now, let's work to the Fed. That was the biggest announcement yesterday before the Thanksgiving holiday, which has closed the markets in the US today. They said that they're ready to raise interest rates if inflation runs hot. Well, I think a lot of us on this program would be saying, well, so what? We've heard that. We've heard that before. I think what was notable, and as much as you're getting any crumbs from this, was the silence of the doves, if I can put it like that, that there was no dovish talk whatsoever. They also they also indicated this reduction in monthly asset purchases, but the key US inflation figure, I think, actually will push them into some kind of action. 4.1% up in October compared with 3.7% in September, and I think that this sort of winding down of the asset purchases, 120 billion asset purchases at a pace, which suggests it could be finished by June 2022. Two, the markets are saying inflation is not going away anytime soon, and Biden and the rest of us will have to learn to live with it, whatever that means, one way or the other, I suppose. Meanwhile, just in terms of supply, California stocks, the big ones at Long Beach and Los Angeles, have made apparently significant progress in getting material through. Since the announcement of fees, it's actually got both courts have seen the lingering containers reduced by about a third, which is very good news. Okay, to the UK then, and this is the first real time that the regulator is actually, the government's helping to give temporary support to Bulb. Bulb is the 7th biggest supplier to say it's going to go bust, 1.6 million customers, but the government is now saying that it will put it in administration, which means it can continue to trade with government support. It's quite a significant move, that, in terms of the energy market. We'll get more from that, no doubt, as the week progresses, or indeed into next week now. The UK seeks to counter China's influence. What they're doing is, this Belt and Road initiative that China actually has, which is linking up things. Well, now the British government is attempting to lever private capital to fund projects in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean as a sort of alternative to this. I know that many African countries have sort of got indebted to this soft power of the Chinese, maybe some of them wishing that they hadn't. There's something to discuss. It's going to be called the British International Investment Group, and it's a revamp of the Commonwealth Development Corps. The quote is, a network of liberty around the world with our friends and partners, but basically it's a challenge to China. Oil's flat after that SPR move we saw yesterday. We've got that decision actually ticked quite a few boxes. I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference. Certainly people working in the oil market don't think it'll make any difference at all. And I should remind you, as we said yesterday, full meeting of OPEC on December the 2nd. And gold, well, just trading sideways basically between 1780 and to 1810 for the rest of the week, given the fact that we've had that inflation news. Didn't move the markets massively yesterday, and of course it's Thanksgiving today in the United States, which means very little action from them. That's the global view.
All right, Michael, 2 quick things. Number one, the Fed says we're going to increase interest rates if inflation runs high. Is the Fed looking at the shopping trolleys, people be having this Thanksgiving? Because inflation is eating up the Thanksgiving dinner so bad.
Absolutely not. No, it's not looking at the shopping trolley. The point about this inflation measure is that it excludes food and anything which is volatile. So no, it will not be looking at that. Okay. That's the point of this particular indicator, and that's why the Fed looks at it so closely. In other words, what they're saying is that these are the sticky ones, the things that are not volatile. This is the general movement of inflation, and so that's why it's quite significant to see that I think the doves have now had their day in the United States. I don't think we're going to get a rapid increase in interest rates there, but they are saying, in as much as this is Fed speak, if it starts to run too hot, then they will take action. But as well as the doves being silent, there's this constant refrain of flexibility in the central bank's approach. So no, not looking at Thanksgiving, not looking at shopping trolleys, taking notice of things which are not volatile.
Okay, so Germany finally has a government in place now, with Olaf Scholz doing a deal with some other parties, the Free Liberal Democratic Party and some other parties in Germany. But the sticky point for me will be who becomes the finance minister. They're saying a certain, Friedrich Lindner will be the finance minister. He's known to be very hawkish. What will be the outlook of Germany, in the world dealing and in Europe in general? Because now, with this coalition, Germany is saying they want to spend big. They want to be big on climate change and clean, renewable energy. And they want to modernize Germany, as it were, and that brings more spending to the table. So what's going to be like the economic outlook of Germany in the coming days?
Well, in the coming days, the real problem is nothing to do with the issues you've been talking about. It's wondering how on earth they're going to get through lockdown and what that'll do to the economy. But you're absolutely right. The next task, the big task, but it won't be in the coming days, will be to actually make sure that money is spent on the infrastructure, which has not been spent in Germany, and also to modernise its industries and to somehow modernise this fix that they have of being the 70s and 80s. No question, they achieved an economic miracle there. 10. But it's still the Mittelschaft companies, you know, the little ones, which are now going to have to grow and maybe swap from manufacturing into artificial intelligence and all those tech industries that Germany should be good at. It will be because they always make the trains run on time one way or the other. It's just a question of change, and change, I think, is going to be quite massive. It'll be a long time before we see any movement as far as Germany is concerned. I really don't think it makes any difference in terms of, you know, who has the individual jobs. The task is there, but the most important thing that they have to get over right now is lockdown and COVID, which is rising, as Merkel was saying only a few days ago, into this horrible fourth wave, and it's engulfing other countries within the EU.
Well, Michael, first let's talk about the JP Morgan boss, who has had to apologize for the comment he made when he was at Boston College, where he made a comment that JP Morgan will outlast the Communist Party. The Communist Party celebrating 100 years, JP Morgan also celebrating 100 years. And that was, drew a very sharp rebuke in China, with Global Times, the state-backed newspaper, saying that, well, the CCCP, the Communist Party, will outlast the United States itself. And now Jamie Dillon has had to apologize. Do you think in any way that will mitigate the damage that has been done? Because there are fears that, the Chinese authorities may clamp down on JP Morgan's presence, emerging presence in China. And then, of course, the Commerce Department blacklisting 12 more tech companies from China. Well, what is new, really? Because they do this all the time. And 12 companies now, but there are additional companies from South Korea, from Japan, from other places. Not Japan. Japan is not on that list. Now, what is new? Does this have anything to do with the growing tension over Taiwan and the U.S. trying to further squeeze China? And what do you think is likely to be the Chinese response?
I think if it's about China and Taiwan, it's politically inept, because the whole point about sitting down with China was to come to some sort of agreement about Taiwan's future. It's clear that China wants it and the United States doesn't want it to happen, but there may be a halfway house here which diplomats will be working towards. I have to say I'm absolutely agreeing with you. I don't see why the Americans are putting restrictions on a further 12 companies. So what? I mean, it's part of the diplomatic dance. As far as JP Morgan and communism is concerned, well, I tell you what, if I were a communist leader in China, I'd be laughing at that, saying, I think you've got it completely wrong. JP Morgan will be in the rubble before communism actually stops in China. It's part of an era. It's not going to go away. It's what they believe in. Their president has elected himself to be a lifetime president and has set out his stall that it's prosperity for everybody. That is what communism says it's going to deliver. So JP Morgan will be long gone before communism actually, and the idea of it and the idea of fairness actually disappears. As far as JP Morgan's game is concerned, well, it could learn a lot from HSBC and the other big banks, couldn't it? Who have to deal with, on the one side, China, and they've got Hong Kong in the middle, and they've got Western economies as well, in which they have in which they have business interests. I think JP Morgan could learn a lot from HSBC. It's not something which you should be saying as a leading banker, because the way of the world is leading bankers are also, unfortunately or fortunately, leading statesmen as well. It was a very clumsy thing to say.
Right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our dependable Rotas Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotas.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick off with a repost, if you want, right of reply from Honeywell Flour Mills PLC and Flour Mills of Nigeria. We'll start first with Honeywell. You should see page 1 of a letter that they put out to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, regulators, shareholders, saying that they are refuting the claims made by EcoBank that Honeywell Flour Mills PLC is indebted to them. Just a little backstory. Flour Mills of Nigeria is acquiring a 71% stake in Honeywell Flour Mills PLC. Enterprise value is about 80 billion naira. Enterprise value is a metric that you use to measure a company that is going to be taking over, looking at debt and a number of other things, market capitalization and so on. So EcoBank, of course, as we said yesterday, came out saying that they are winding down some assets used as collateral for loans that they extended to Honeywell Flour Mills PLC. So Honeywell came out with their letter saying that that's not the case, that as far as them being indebted to EcoBank, that has not been determined by any courts, and there is no winding down of any assets at all. That's what Honeywell is saying. Let's now take a look at Flour Mills of Nigeria, who is supposed to be the acquirer here. They put out a letter just addressing, again, both of them addressing regulators, shareholders, stakeholders, and so on, saying that, hey, listen, Doctor mentioned this yesterday when he was responding to this story. Doctor talked about the need to do due diligence. Did Flour Mills of Nigeria do their necessary due diligence before embarking on this takeover of this 71% stake of Honeywell Flour Mills PLC? So in the letter from Flour Mills of Nigeria, they say, yes, we did our due diligence, everything checked out, everything met regulatory standards, everything's fine. And they also said that the two letters also mentioned this report coming out from EcoBank saying that, hey, listen, this transaction is in no way impacted by whatever is happening between EcoBank and Honeywell Flour Mills. We're fine. So that's the two companies. They're putting out letters respectively to regulators, stakeholders, shareholders, saying that, they're good. So we'll see how things turn out with respect to whatever is in front of the courts now between Honeywell Flour Mills PLC and EcoBank. We move to aviation. Hadi Sirika, Minister of State for Aviation, after yesterday's Federal Executive Council meeting, told reporters that Nigerian Air is still going to happen. And he says, all things being equal, it should happen in April of 2022. He says, of course, that Nigeria is seeking a strategic partner via a procurement process. And whoever that strategic partner is will hold a 49% stake in the airline. The government's not going to hold anything more than a 5% stake, and about another 46% will be for local entrepreneurs. Initial capital needed between $150 million to $300 million at the official exchange rate. That's about 62 to 120 billion naira. And, well, I mean, Hadi Sirika is really going for this airline. I mean, you remember they abandoned this the plans in 2018. There was the air show. Rufai went on about that quite a bit. The logo, which you should already see on your screen, which was outsourced to a foreign company. The whole hullabaloo. It just, they said it was suspended in 2018, and now he says it's coming back in 2022. I mean, we all know about aviation struggles in other countries in Africa and, what COVID has done to the aviation industry. Is this wise? Who is this shareholder? Shouldn't we have heard from this shareholder by now? We'll all be here in April of 2022 and see how that works out. To Kenya, Kenya's treasury. So Kenya is trying to reintroduce tolls. And, maybe you guys can talk about this. Why we see this resistance from citizenry to tolls in Africa? Is it because they don't trust government and they feel that they are being unduly taxed when it comes to tolls? Either way, whatever reason it is, Kenya is bracing itself for resistance. So the Kenyan Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani was speaking to the Parliament and said that they've reassured private investors who have put money into tolls in Kenya that if there is resistance in the form of lawsuits or physical protests, that they will dip into their treasury, use taxes to make up that difference if for any reason. It's just, we talked about Kenya yesterday, how Kenya self-imposed a ban on mango exports to the EU because they didn't want the EU to ban it and then give them trouble when they fix their fruit flies and other matters. So here's Kenya again with some sort of foresight saying that, hey, look, telling investors that, listen, we need your money in this country. We're trying to reduce our budget deficit. We're trying to increase infrastructure. If there are any protests, if there are any lawsuits, we will use taxes, taxpayer money to make up your investments in these roads. 2016, there was the Nairobi Southern Bypass that they tried to put up a tolled road. Because of an uproar, they abandoned it. Why are we so resistant to tolls? Maybe you folks can help us out. And then finally, Papa John's, the third largest pizza company in the world after Pizza Hut and Domino's. Papa John's is opening 60 outlets in Kenya and Uganda. As has been done with other these fast food companies, they are using a subsidiary, well, not a subsidiary, they're using a company that's already based in Kenya and Uganda, Kitchen Express, which is a subsidiary of AAH Limited, which apparently is a petroleum company which is diversifying and going into foods and so that's the vehicle they're using to get into the markets. Domino's, KFC, all these other companies already in the African region, which is a growth region for all these companies that are coming to introduce their fast foods. That's our update.
I mean, Rotus, it just shows, okay. Tony, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I don't even know. Where does one begin? I think I'll start with the toll question that you asked. People do feel like it's double taxation, but strictly speaking, a toll is a user charge. It's not a tax. Taxes are levied by statute, so it's different definition-wise, but when you're parting with money, it does feel awfully similar. So that's where that is. And you know, in Nigeria, the minister, Babatunde Fashola, has said this year, I believe this summer, that the tolls are coming back to Nigerian roads and 14% of federal roads are eligible. So Nigerians should look forward to paying 150 naira to 500 naira, apart from exemptions, like if you're in, you know, the diplomatic corps or the military or paramilitary. Tricycles and motorcycles, I believe, but the rest of us can look forward to that pretty soon. I don't know how you feel about that, Rotus. I'd like to hear. And then about Papa John's. For me, recently, I'm sorry to say, I think of Papa John's and I remember how the CEO, I think he's now been removed, hasn't he, was sacked for using the N-word, and then saying it took him 2 years to get rid of the N-word from his vocabulary. And then there have been allegations of sexual misconduct from this same man. So even though he's left, that brand for me has been really tarnished. So this is good news. So now I can think, when I think of Papa John's, I can think of Kenya and Uganda, not any of that tawdry business. As for the logo and name for Nigerian Air, you'll recall, yes, when it was launched, the name and the logo from a foreign company to general bemusement. And those who were bemused were not proved wrong. It was such a damp squib because apparently what happened at the end of the day was that the investors pulled out. And it's quite telling for me. I read the briefing from the Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, to State House correspondents, and he used the word if the airline starts. So it's still not set in stone. It's all really on a wing and a prayer, pardon the aviation pun there. And those are my thoughts. So
for me, I'll start with Papa John's first. It just shows that Africa is the next frontier. And the sad part for me in this narrative, Roto, is that Africans are not taking full, account of these opportunities we have. I want to see more African companies do well in confectionaries. It's not only Papa John. After so many tries, finally, I think through using a pre-existing company too on ground, Johnny Rockets is in Nigeria. And you can see the spread of all these big companies, these big confectionery companies, but they're using companies on ground that understand the market, that know the market, and they're putting the foreign brand to it. I want to see a day where a Nigerian confectionery company can open up in Kenya, in Uganda, and every part of Africa, because the market is mammoth and increasingly is a market yet untapped. For me, with this Nigerian Air thing, so yes, it's good to play this squid game we play, and no pun intended in that. I mean, it's the squid game, it's the die or leave game we play with government infrastructure. But if the minister is saying he really wants to go through with this, I just have a couple of questions. What is going to be the unique selling points in an era when we know that airlines are losing money? Even airlines that are better run are struggling to survive. Your likes of Ethiopian Air and Co. are struggling post-pandemic. So what is the unique selling point? What will make people look at an Ethiopian Air at the airport and say, no, I'm flying Nigerian Air? Secondly, are we ready to be able to dole out that cash needed? I'm not saying if investors don't come in, things won't work well. I mean, I want it to succeed. But do we have that arsenal to spend, that kind of cash to spend, in a time where a lot of people are complaining because we're spending so much money, over 200 billion we will be spending every month now to cushion the effect of subsidy removal? and then we'll have to put money into this airline business. So do we have that cash to spend? But if he has a great plan about it and he knows how he's going to work it out, I mean, I wish him a lot of luck. I want him to succeed. I want Nigeria to succeed. But I think we must ask the very hard questions sometimes. Dr. Bati?
Well, quickly on Nigeria Air, the minister said that his ministry was able to get approval for first, what he calls a truth machine, which is like a one-stop app, where you can monitor aviation activities in Nigeria real time. And that will be that particular machine will be available at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. That may seem to make sense as part of an effort to upgrade, the technological end of aviation in Nigeria. Then the second thing that he got approval for is what he called the outline business case, which he said we got lucky the sixth time. Now, that outline business case, you recall that in 2018 was the basis on which the ICRC, the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission of Nigeria, granted a certificate of competence for the establishment of a national carrier. Now, that certificate of no objection, or certificate of compliance, if you like, that was issued by the ICRC, stated certain conditions. Some of those conditions included the fact that, one, the process will be private sector driven. And that was why I guess the minister was harping on the fact that federal government will have only 5% equity. Nigerians will have, other investors in Nigeria will have 46% equity. The remaining percentage will be given to an international strategic partner. But in that particular approval by the ICRC, which you may call an approval in principle, certain conditions were laid out. One, no government interference. Government should not be involved in management. But what we have seen is that, it's government that is still driving it. Two, that there will be open competitive bidding. Now, there has been no open competitive bidding, either before or, after the suspension, and we don't think it will happen. The ICRC also asked for something they call VGF, which is Viability Government Fund. Now, where is that Viability Government Fund going to come from before April? Is this planned by the Ministry of Aviation? Is it captured in any way in the budget or even in the National Development Plan? The ICRC also insisted that there should be an MRO, which is a maintenance repair unit that should be in place before a company can be established. So at the moment, I don't know whether anybody will be able to meet those conditions before April. But those are things that we need to worry about. Now, more importantly, AMCON, there are persons who have said, look, rather than setting up a new company, AMCON is already, in charge of some aviation, airlines in the country. You have Aricare, right. You have Aero, you have whatever remained of, is it Virgin Nigeria? And there are some, analysts who are saying, why don't you put all of this together, off AMCON and get private investors and strengthen, those already existing airlines instead of trying to start a new company afresh. Now, beyond all of these details, the other big detail is the plight of Nigeria Airways staff. The federal government, at the time, the former disengaged Nigeria Airways staff constituted themselves into a union. They said government, is owing them in terms of their entitlements after liquidation of Nigeria Airways in 2003, a total of about 45 billion naira. Many of those airways pensioners and retirees, they used to carry placards in front of the airport as anybody addressed their plight. So at this recap, we have been able to get approval for whatever he wants for his ministry and his dream of Nigeria Air. But I think that whatever is done going forward, a thought should be spared for those hapless retired Nigeria Airways staff who will look at this and say nobody is talking about them. Now, another point that Hadi Sirika brought up is that if Nigeria launches this airline, then it will facilitate our participation in intra-African trade. It's in line with the objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Fine. We are signatory to the Open Skies Agreement, which is at the heart of the AFCTA. We have bilateral, aviation services agreements with a total of about 70 countries. But Nigeria has never been able to leverage on all of these opportunities. These are some of the other issues that we need to investigate beyond Hadi Sirika saying Council has given approval. And where is the role of the Ministry of Transportation in this? What is the National Economic Council saying in this regard? What are other stakeholders saying? So it's not as simple as saying we have approval and by April we will have Nigerian Air fully operational. Well, I doubt that.
All right, thank you so much, Rotus. Time will tell, as they say. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Moro is here with us. Great to have you, Adesua. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati.
Morning.
Good morning, Adesua.
Well, we have the weekly breakdown of the morning, Dr. Abati. Morning, our viewers. Let's get right into it. We have the weekly breakdown of the pandemic data, thanks to the WHO weekly epidemiological report. Now, in the past week, coronavirus cases and deaths globally have risen about 6%, with about 3.6 million new infections and 51,000 new deaths. We can also have a look of what the Johns Hopkins University is saying at this time. But in Europe, cases jumped by 11%. The only region in the world where COVID-19 cases has continued to increase since mid-October. I beg your pardon this morning, I'm having a lot of echo at the moment, but hopefully you can hear me. In Southeast Asia and Middle East, COVID-19 dropped by 11% and 9% respectively. The biggest decrease, however, for the week in coronavirus deaths in the last week was seen in Africa, where fatalities actually fell by 30%. And that's a continuous decrease that first began in late June. In the Americas, although cases remain stable, the WHO said that COVID-19 deaths rose by 19% in the Americas. We're also seeing cases in America and Canada spiking ahead of the holidays. Thanksgiving travel expected, of course, again, to see those numbers jump. The easier to spread Delta variant, we've been told, remains the dominant COVID-19 variant, according to the WHO. Let's look at what the data is saying here in Nigeria in the last 24 hours. A backlog of cases from the epicenter Lagos and the north central Benue state make up 90 of the 141 infections reported in the last 24 hours by the NCDC. No COVID-19 related deaths were recorded for the third consecutive day in Nigeria. And here's the breakdown of the vaccination exercise by the 36 states and Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Currently, 5.5% of eligible Nigerians in the targeted population have received the jab, while 3.1% have been fully vaccinated. And as with many countries on the continent, Nigeria is off track to vaccinate 40% of our population by the end of the year. Meanwhile, the chief of the WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says vaccines are providing a false sense of security, warning that no country is out of the woods just yet. He was speaking at a press briefing in Geneva yesterday. Dr. Tedros says available data is also suggesting that coronavirus vaccines help reduce transmission of the dominant Delta variant by 40%. According to him, before the arrival of the Delta variant, the vaccines could help reduce the same transmission by 60%. So again, it tells you just how highly transmissible the Delta variant is becoming. In South Africa, vaccine supply is no longer a constraint, yet vaccine hesitancy is hindering inoculation in the country. And to this end, the South African government is now asking manufacturers Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer to actually delay deliveries of vaccines purchased to the country. According to the health minister, the vaccine hesitancy has slowed the inoculation campaign, and the country has just enough stock at the moment. 35% of South Africans are fully vaccinated. It has actually one of the highest on the continent of Africa when it comes to immunization. But that 35%, I must tell you, is even half of the government's target for the year end. And finally, to Russia, where authorities continue to struggle to convince people to get vaccinated amid a surge in cases and deaths. But President Putin seems to be leaving nothing to chance when it comes to personal protection. Yesterday, he announced he had received an experimental nasal coronavirus vaccine. Now, this comes barely days after he received a booster shot of the Sputnik Light. That, which was days ago, actually came 6 months after he was fully inoculated, taking 2 doses of the Sputnik V. So President Putin seems to be taking everything that comes his way. Back to you guys.
All right, it seems to be taking everything that comes his way. Should that make us really scared? And because there are protocols to be able to take vaccines. I mean, once he's taking the booster shot, he should be able to keep it that way. And we have seen in other climes, the booster shot works just well. I mean, the argument is being made of the UK now that because of the good regime it had for booster shots, that's why it's not been inundated with all the challenges Europe is facing now as regards upsurge of cases. So the question is, why is he taking all of that? Because we have the protocols. You take the booster shot, you're protected. So this is the time for all of us and nations to look inward. Because you see, when Putin is doing all of this, it only gives power to those arguments for the anti-vaxxers. You know, when you see him taking all of this experimental nasal spray, taking a booster jab at the same time and all of that, let's just follow the protocols. And amidst all of this, let's also remember that there are nations that do not have, you know, enough vaccines that we can ship them to those nations. Secondly, I'd like to talk about this specifically. And this is where we're at that time of the year again. And COVID-19 cases will only go up. Why? Because we'll have people coming to the country. You know, we'll have people that carry all sorts and come into the country. How prepared are we? Yes, we're taking this to the markets now. We're increasing our vaccination drive. We're telling people to take this vaccine. But the sad part of all of this is that this is why people have stopped wearing face masks. Those non-pharmaceutical methods, people don't do that any longer. It's business as usual for events. We're still having cramped up events and everything. I mean, I don't want to spoil anybody's joy, but I can tell you for free that Dirty December is in full swing. Everybody's organizing. And nobody's talking about the fact that you have a lot of people visiting from other parts of the world where there's a resurgence of COVID-19 pandemic. And what are we doing as regards that?
Well, very quickly, I find interesting, not necessarily the personality of President Putin, but the fact that the Russians have also developed a nasal spray. The Gamalev Center says that this particular nasal spray would, halt, it's a barrier immunity kind of mechanism that would prevent the infection, the virus, from going from the mucous membranes down to the lungs and the liver.
Yes.
And that, it's just a way of arresting it early. So I think it's an interesting development for science. But Russia is not the first to do this. You know that much earlier in the year, the Israelis came up with what they call a nasal spray called Enovate, which was, given interim approval for sale and distribution, both in Israel and also in New Zealand. And we're told that this particular nasal spray, you can use it 5 times. You can spray it, 5 times in a day. And also Canada followed suit. And there was even the test of a nasal spray, brand also in the United Kingdom. But the indication is that it's 99.9% effective. That's what the Israelis claimed. The Canadians, they claim it's about 94% effective. So as science begins to look for different ways, in which the COVID-19 can be tackled, we're likely to see a number of other measures being introduced on the basis of research. The Russians have said that at the moment, they're testing the nasal spray on their staff, and President Putin volunteered to be part of that test. So we have President Putin there who has taken 4 different, COVID treatments. 3 doses of Sputnik 5 plus that nasal spray. So that makes it 4. However, the concern that has been expressed about Europe. Yesterday, I was saying that the WHO regional chief was saying that, look, what we have seen in Europe is a clear indication that perhaps what we need is not just vaccination, but what you call vaccination plus. And those are the basic, steps we are asked to take, the basic precautions, the wearing of face masks, limiting, social contact, and all of that. Because in some of those countries in Europe, as I pointed out, the vaccination rate is 84.4%. The average across Europe is 67.7%. Now, if you are fully vaccinated, yes, as Dr. Ghebreyesus pointed out, it gives you a false sense of security. But the message from Europe, which has had the highest rate of death and infection in the last week, is that even complete vaccination does not necessarily protect you. And I hope that governments would pay attention to this and, put it as part of their strategies, particularly in those countries where people are resisting lockdowns.
Right, as Putin is, having this nasal shot of, COVID treatment, there's a concern being raised by the FDA about that Merck drug, molnupiravir, I think it's pronounced, I can't recall.
Molnupiravir.
Yes, it's a tongue twister.
Yes.
So apparently there's some concerns that it could create vaccine-resistant COVID strains. So good heavens, it seems like 1 step forward, 2 steps backward. But obviously, Merck has denied that. So I'm really looking forward to how that's resolved one way or another, because that is quite concerning. And then there's some hysterical headlines in some places about a new Botswana strain of the COVID. We've had Delta, and now they're talking about Botswana. Should they be talking about Botswana? I thought WHO was very clear that we're not to stigmatize any geographical location. But anyway.
Well, thank you very much, Adesu Amara. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Yes. Okay.
You were going to say something?
See you guys tomorrow. Yes.
Okay.
Now, I was just going to say that, to add to what Tunu has said, that strain has been found in 10 countries, but it did emanate from Botswana.
Oh, dear.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just as the Spanish flu didn't emanate from Spain. Thank you, Adesu.